Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Great. Yeah, really,
Doing
really
great.
good.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, right.
Oh, my pleasure. I've
Okay.
been really enjoying the chat and the guests that guys have had on so far. It's been fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Really glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, Klaus was great, and Jen Sale is just a one of a kind person.
Yes, it's amazing what she's doing. I think it's always, like Klaus was saying, all of us can contribute to the vegan movement in different ways. Like there are so many different ways to contribute. And I think that seeing someone like Jen on, it really shows us how much important work there is to be done and how much we need people like her.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Right, I'm just posting out on Facebook that you're now live, and then we'll be good to go. So yeah, so we're talking about the future of veganism then, which is going to be exciting. We follows perfectly on from Klaus.
Yeah, well, because he was talking a lot about the future of veganism and the amazing things that have happened in 2017. It's been pretty incredible to see all that's happened.
Yeah, great. So yeah, we're all posted out and promoted. So I mean, first off, I guess do you want to introduce yourself to everybody? Tell people who you are, what you do.
Well, I'm Margaret, and my channel here on YouTube is ModVegan. I also have a blog where I write about the same kind of topics. I usually tend to do more of my sources and citations on the blog, and then I make the videos on YouTube. And I've been doing this for about a year and a half, and it's been such a wonderful journey. It's been so nice to get to meet so many other people. I initially started just because I wanted to meet more people. Like there are not always that many vegans in your real life. I think most of us who are online, we don't always know that many vegans in real life. I've been very fortunate though. I think a lot of almost everyone I know now is vegan. So pretty exciting. My whole family is vegan. I've managed to force convert everyone, I guess, but it's been really cool and just an amazing journey over the last year and a half. My blog and my channel tends to focus on modern veganism and the future of veganism because I'm really excited. I think way before I ever became vegan, I was always kind of convinced that the future of the world would be vegan, that animal exploitation for clothing, for food, for entertainment, it's all extremely outdated. It's wrong always to cause other beings to suffer if it's not necessary. And that's always been an important part of my ethic. I don't know why it took me so long to go vegan, but but I think it's something that most people believe anyway, and it's just becoming more and more easy to become vegan, to accept this new lifestyle. I think it's becoming a lot easier for all of us. So that's mostly what I talk about.
Amazing. So I mean, following on from Klaus, then I mean, how have you seen this year yourself with the progress in the vegan movement? What's kind of excited you?
Well, of course, like we've all seen that the numbers, I think, are the first thing. Like we've seen exponential growth in the numbers of vegans around the world. Like there are so many more vegans, especially in countries like the US, Canada, Germany, the UK, of course, Israel. Like it's just exploding all over the world. People are starting to realize that this is doable, that it's safe, the things that people weren't always sure about before. I think sometimes it takes a little while for people to realize that it's a real possibility. And then I've also noticed a lot of changes in the business environment as well, kind of like what Klaus was saying, with companies investing in plant-based foods and things like that. Like it's made a big difference, and it's certainly made all of these things a lot more accessible to people.
Yeah, totally. So I guess, obviously what the subject of this is talking about the future of veganism then. So I mean, where are you seeing things go? What do you think, I mean, are we going to reach that ultimate vegan world, do you think? Is it within our grasp?
I think it is. I think that it may take some time to reach, 100% level. Obviously, I think that that's going to take a little bit longer, kind of just like what Klaus was saying. Um, it's going to take a little bit longer to achieve something like that, but I think it's easily achievable for it to become the majority way of living in the future. And I can see people looking down on meat eaters in the future as people who just, won't get with the program. I think that that's more likely what we're going to see is just this shift because as it becomes easier to do, it becomes more affordable. I think a lot of people are going to have kind of a post hoc justification of their behavior. A lot of people are going to eat plant-based foods, drink plant-based milk, not necessarily because they're such great people, but because it's more affordable. And then they're going to say, well, it's because I'm vegan, right?
Yeah.
I think that that's going to happen later.
Okay. I mean, one thing I've always been interested in is obviously, we call ourselves vegans and everything. I mean, when do you see the time when we are no longer vegan? I mean, what do you think will happen to the term? Because once the world is vegan, I mean, are we still vegan or are we just normal now?
I think that there will be a change there. I can't predict how that's going to occur, what people are going to call themselves in the future. I think that for ethical vegans, once the world sort of accepts that exploitation is the wrong thing to do, we will probably refer to people who exploit animals as exploiters, and it's going to be like we call people racist today. I mean, that it's probably going to be the same kind of epithet. I don't really know what we're going to do in that respect exactly, but I have a feeling it's going to be kind of the same way. People are going to react instinctively against, once it becomes a normal way of living, people are going to be very suspicious of people who still exploit animals when they don't need to.
I mean, have you seen the documentary Carnage, the British documentary?
Yes, the mockumentary. Yes, it was hilarious.
There was a great line on there when someone was getting interviewed and they said, "Oh, you're just a vegan." He said, "We're not vegans. You're carnists."
Yeah, that part game.
And that was kind of like the changing of the use of language and stuff, which I found really interesting because, I mean, we've all got, vegan is kind of like our identity in a way, isn't it? And so it'd be strange to kind of shed that identity and just become normal. But it'll be great at the same time.
Well, and I think exactly, and that's why I think it's so exciting that people like you are excited about that. Like, I'm excited for veganism to no longer be a big deal, for everyone to just know that it's right not to exploit anyone unless you have to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that I'm excited for that. I think there are some people who are a little afraid of losing that identity, and I made a video about it just this last week. Like, I do think that is a fear for some people. But I think we'll get over it. At least I hope so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Tim, did you want
We need more newbie vegans. We need more people excited about not exploiting animals. So I hope that we'll all be welcoming people who are giving up animal products.
Yeah, definitely. Tim, did you want to cut in here? I thought you were going to say something now.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were about to ask a question or something. So moving forward then, obviously you said you wanted to talk a bit about kind of vegan technology and stuff. Obviously we've got the kind of Memphis meats and stuff, which is kind of happening. I mean, do you think that stuff like lab meat is the solution, or do you think that we've already got the solutions with the plant-based kind of, things like Beyond Meat and the Impossible Burger? I mean, do you think we need to really go the lab meat?
I think that we need to explore different options. I think as long as we aren't hurting anyone doing it, I think it's the right thing to do. I have some reservations with Memphis meats because I think a lot of the way that they are producing their product is more questionable, kind of as Klaus was alluding to. Some of these companies have really ethical procedures. I know that Hampton Creek doesn't want to be, ever harming animals in the way that they produce this. They found a plant-based growth medium. I think that's really important. If we're going to have clean meat, it must be a plant-based growth medium. You can't be growing it in, blood from fetal pigs and things like that. Like, they've done some really weird stuff over at Memphis Meat, and I think that is concerned a lot of people. I know that their head scientist there is very eager to end animal exploitation, but in doing so, I think that sometimes people end up using methods that they definitely should not be using. So, that's definitely a problem. I think that's something to consider. But I'm excited about what Hampton Creek is doing. I wanted to tell you guys about a company called Perfect Day that I've been researching lately. And Perfect Day, as you guys were saying, one of the biggest obstacles that people have to going vegan is the cheese, because we have some pretty good plant-based milks. There's some great stuff like Ripple that has more of a milk-like flavor. But what Perfect Day is doing is a lot like the Impossible Burger. A lot of these companies that are really creating really good analogs to traditional animal products, they're using biotechnology. And that's how you get the heme iron that has that specific flavor in the Impossible Burger. And it's also how they're going to be doing milk at a Perfect Day. So what they do is they take a protein, and once they have one, that's all that they need. They take a protein from milk, and once they've got that, they can create all that they need. They combine it with sugars, and they genetically alter it so that it can grow in like an algae medium. So basically, it creates milk. So you make milk without a cow, it grows, and it's lactose free. I contacted the company. I'm not completely sure if it has the same protein as milk, which would have some more problems, certainly for people who are allergic and things like that. But the really cool thing is that they not only genetically engineered this milk, they also have the rennet. So they genetically engineer the rennet, which I think they've actually been doing for some time. A lot of rennet is not derived from animals. It's made in a lab. And so what they can do is they can make cheese. It's exactly like real cheese, because it is real cheese. It's just not from a cow. And the company is created by two vegans who really wanted to do this. It's being funded in Silicon Valley, and they've had extremely good success. Obviously, these things start out expensive. And we can't forget, I think that first vegan burger, well, it was the first plant-based lab-created burger. It was like $350,000 in order, which is ridiculous, right? But the problem those problems are because technology is always expensive in the research and development stage. And it's going to get cheaper over time. It just takes time for those costs to come down with scale.
That's really interesting.
And I'm sure it's the same with it.
Yeah, so we're looking at the lab-grown cheese, basically, is on the way,
exactly.
which is really exciting because that's going to be the...
Yeah.
Because I think, that I honestly think once we nail the cheese, then everything's going to be so much easier, because I think people can give up meat quite easily. I think, we've got so many replacements for it now and they pretty much all taste the same. But cheese is the one. And obviously it is addictive as well because of the creatine morphine in it. So if we can give them an accurate kind of, replacement for that, then I can see there being, the vegan world is definitely one step closer there, which is...
Yeah, and as we saw with Jen talking, like the way that cows are treated on any farm, it doesn't really matter whether it's an organic dairy farm, it does not matter. Like this is slavery, pure and simple, and it's a horrible life. No sentient being should have to go through that. And I think that when normal people see this, one thing that's really impressed me is seeing just average people who eat animal products, when they see the inside of these farms, they're horrified, and it creates this cognitive dissonance where they try to ignore it and just continue living their lives. But it gets harder and harder to ignore when there are options. And I think having that option, being able to realize that you don't need to do it, I think that's super important.
Yeah, totally. We've just got to give a quick shout out to OG and Danny that just donated £50. So thanks so much, guys.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
That's amazing and really, really generous. Thanks so much, guys. You are
that is awesome.
Awesome. So, I mean, besides, obviously, we've got the progress with kind of the vegan cheeses and the vegan meats. I mean, where else are you seeing kind of veganism go? I mean, there's a lot of kind of activism and stuff happening. I mean, do you think we're going to see any, obviously the Save movement, for example, are standing outside slaughterhouses everywhere and all that kind of stuff. I mean, do you see those kind of things becoming more and more prominent as well? I mean, are we going to be seeing like entire towns kind of turn on the industry, so to speak?
I know that Direct Action Everywhere, for example, is really excited to see that happen. They're kind of trying an experiment in Berkeley, California, to see what happens when you have a bunch of vegans move into a place, if they can kind of normalize that in that city. So that'll be interesting just to watch and see what happens there. It's been interesting with some of these groups, a lot of the actions that they take, like the Save movement and a lot of these other groups. I think it would have been harder to accept in the past when veganism seemed so untenable. I mean, the early vegan society, as wonderful as it was, they did have problems with things like B12 deficiency and stuff. A lot of the founding members became very ill because they didn't know about these things. And being able to show that we are healthy and fit and that it makes absolutely no difference, it's really important. And I think that's going to be an important part of it as well. I don't think the ethical part will ever go away. That's something that is very important. So when I talk about a vegan world, I just mean the end of animal exploitation, but I still think that the ethical aspect of it is really integral, and it becomes an easier pill for people to swallow over time, I think. I think that it may sound ridiculous, and I hear from a lot of vegans when they see groups like Direct Action Everywhere saying that it's not meat, it's violence. It may sound odd to the outside world right now, but it is changing because things are changing. They're beginning to see that, oh, I can eat this Beyond Burger instead. I can drink this Perfect Day milk. I can do all the things. I think that's why the technology is such an important part of it. It's going to be very important, I think, in the leather industry, in the silk industry, different industries like that as well, because it's also about saving our planet. I mean, we have finite resources, and we can do so much in order to improve the efficiency of what we do. Because one thing I think vegans often, and the general public as well, they tend to see violence in animal agriculture, and they think that, oh, if we could just return to some kind of idyllic, sheep wandering in a field, that it would fix everything, and that's not true. I mean, the energy loss and everything like that is a really integral part of why this will always fail. We have to find a more efficient procedure, and even the most efficient factory farm is not as efficient as a plant is. Like, plants are just incredibly efficient at turning sunlight into energy that we can use. So
yeah. So I mean, as far as kind of growing plants is concerned, obviously we've still got there is quite a lot of problems in growing crops. We're still using pesticides. Animals are still kind of dying there. I mean, do you think that we are going to go that route of kind of hydroponics and vertical farms and stuff? I mean, do you think that is the solution, or do you think there's maybe another thing that we haven't kind of looked at yet, or something about that we don't maybe?
Well, I think there's always different options, and then we should explore all of them. I'm interested in hydroponics. I'm interested in biotechnology. I'm someone who is pro GMO because I think that it's poorly understood by a lot of people. I understand why people are concerned about it, but I think that generally comes from not being aware of how these procedures work. And I think a lot of it is based on the worst PR I've ever seen. Like, obviously, I mean, my master's degree is in history, and I studied the drug war in Colombia. So if there's anyone who has huge issues with Monsanto, it's me. I mean, I saw that country devastated with the spraying that went on there. So I am not like pro Monsanto at all. I have huge issues with Roundup Ready crops. But that's not all that biotech is. There's a lot more to it. And I think that it's going to become more part of the way that we do our food supply. I think that transparency is a huge issue. People need to know what's in their food. I am very much supportive of labeling laws and things like that, because I think it's good to know. And when people, again, it's almost like with veganism, when people can see that it's safe, that it's better than the alternative, then they're going to choose it. So that's kind of how I feel about that particular technology.
Yeah, totally. One of the things kind of moving forward with veganism is a quote that I think Gary Yourofsky said, where he kind of said that if we're we're getting to the point where we're bringing up children to be able to recognize animals and with things with furs and feathers as as kind of equal to us, of moral value at least, that when they're older, they're going to find it more difficult to look at people of other colours or other shapes and sizes or other sexual orientations or whatever as different. And a lot of people like to think that, they like to say that, veganism is kind of like the solution to fix the world kind of thing. I mean, do you think there is kind of truth to that? Do you think kind of that, being able to get humans relating more to animals, that we will, as a result of that, be kinder to our own race? And maybe kind of help eliminate those kind of things?
I certainly hope so, Chris. And I really think that there's a lot of truth to it. I think that I look at my own children, and when they see animals, they obviously do not see food. They see fellow creatures they want to share the planet with and be kind to. My younger daughter was watching the earlier part of the stream with Jen and my older daughter as well, and they both loved it. They were so excited. And of course, they're being taught to be kind to other people as well. I do think a lot of it does have to do with the kind of education that we're giving our children generally. I don't think that veganism alone is going to solve that problem, because unfortunately, I have witnessed a lot of racism and white supremacism and things like that within the vegan movement, and it's concerning. It's not that it's widespread necessarily, but it's enough of a feature that I think that we need to always be cautious about it. And I don't mean we need to be overly scared about it or anything, but I think it's something we always need to keep an eye on. I think we should be careful about presenting veganism as a panacea. It's one part of a solution. I think anytime you're getting more knowledge about the world, you're starting to realize that we share this planet with other animals, that they matter. That kind of knowledge is really beneficial, and it's certainly better than not knowing it. I think it could help more with diversity and everything like that than if someone didn't know that, but it's not a silver bullet.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about kind of like the school system and stuff. I mean, how do you think we, obviously, because that's going to be quite crucial in bringing us forward to stuff, is actually educating kids with the right information, letting them know where milk really comes from. Because obviously, there was a picture I saw of a children's book yesterday someone posted, and it literally says in there that cows eat grass and then convert the grass into milk and completely miss all the other parts. I mean, I know that James Cameron, I think he actually opened one of the first, he's opened a vegan school, I believe, I think.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know that, but that's wonderful. I'm not surprised. That's marvelous.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, you want to look that up just to make sure that I'm not talking rubbish. But I'm pretty sure that's the case. I mean, so as far as kind of educating people is concerned, I mean, have you seen much progress kind of in that way? I mean, how do we get into the school system, and how do you see the school system kind of developing over the next couple of years to be able to educate people in that way? I mean, there's so much money being thrown in by the industries. How do we influence them to give people the right information?
That's a really good question. I know that for myself, my daughters attend a school where they get sent home reams of propaganda from the egg and dairy industry all the time. And they'll come back from school with, like free swag that is provided by the Canadian Egg Board and things like that. And it's unbelievable the stuff that they say. Like I remember once when right after we'd gone vegan and we stopped buying eggs, my oldest daughter came home and she said, "Mom, we need to start buying eggs and we need to buy white ones because brown ones aren't healthy." Because they had they had white eggs on this literature, and she was being influenced by it clearly. And I had to sit her down and explain why we didn't buy eggs. And she was like, "Oh, well, then they should really not be doing this in school." And that was part of her conclusion. Was like, that's really odd. Why are our teachers telling us this is good for us? And it's something that I think probably in every country, because subsidizing for these industries is so common, especially for eggs and milk. I think with children, obviously, when you get into school lunch programs and things like that, you do have more promotion for meat. But I think initially it's the milk cards. I don't know if you guys have milk cards in the UK. We certainly do in Canada. I know they have a milk program in the US as well. But that and the egg, kind of just the egg board advertising and things like that. I think that those are the things that we want to address in schools, because it is part of, not having our children advertised to. If we don't have Coke machines at our schools, why do we have these industries coming and talking to our kids? Like, can they prove that they're healthier than Coca-Cola, which they probably cannot, especially in the case of eggs. I think it's really, really hard to make that argument that they're so much healthier than the other things that are not allowed to advertise at schools. Yeah. So I'd like to see vegans as a group. I think that's something that, I'd love. Klaus should do a story on it for plant-based news, but we should really be focusing on that. I think that getting the advertising dollars out of our schools is a good first step. Yeah,
that's kind of what I was going to say, whether we think that people should start just speaking up about it more generally. If you've got children in school, maybe we should start, writing letters in and, kind of saying, we want, we don't want this biased information being given to our children.
You wouldn't want them to be selling cigarettes in a school.
No, exactly. And I mean, there's the debate over whether that's the accurate statistic from what the health and everything. But I think regardless, we can say that it's definitely a belief system kind of being rammed down our kids' throats, literally. So, I'd like to see it being addressed.
Yeah. I've not been able to keep up with the chat. Has there been any questions or anything in the chat?
Yeah, I've gotten a couple questions. So, L. Richardson asked, "How long have you been vegan?"
Me? About 2 years. I'll be 2 years in January. I decided to go vegan in August of 2015. So, was it 2016? No, I can't remember. No, 2015. That's terrible. 2015. So in August of 2015, I was at lunch with a friend dinner with a friend who's been a vegetarian almost her entire life, and went home and we had a great conversation that just completely changed the way I thought about everything. It was really cool. I had like a flashback to being a kid because I was eating duck, and she asked me, and I think that's why what Klaus was saying about speaking to your friends and things like that. And it's absolutely true. Every one of you has an impact, and just talking to people, like my friend is not an activist by any means, but she actually just asked me what duck tasted like because she'd never tasted it. And it's an odd question, but if you think about it, it's one of those things that forces people to think. She kind of used the Socratic method on me, and she was asking me like, "Oh, well, why do you think this is, and why do people eat ducks?" and things like, just kind of innocently, but it really got me thinking and remembering my childhood. I had a cousin who had a pet duck, and even though he raised chickens, he would never have hurt this duck because he considered it so different from the chickens, which is pretty bizarre if you think about it. Like, it's the same, right? But went back home and watched Gary Yourofsky videos for hours and Fight Says Emily and things like that. So, yeah.
Nice. So did you period of time where you were vegetarian, or did you just get right into veganism? Were you just like convinced and this is it, I'm going for it?
I was 100% convinced. I came home and told my husband, like, we are never buying meat again. And to his everlasting credit, he said, okay.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. For the first few months, he just would, if we went out to dinner or something, he would have some meat at dinner. And then after a few months, he also went vegan too. And it took me a little, I wouldn't say, that's why I would say January was when I was fully vegan, because it takes a while to kind of learn everything. So I would say it took me a while to like get the hang of what I was doing. But yeah.
Okay, there's a question here. It's quite a big question, but let's try and tackle it. It's from Daddy, who's actually one of the only non-vegans we know in the chat, so it's quite interesting. So he said, how do you see, pragmatically speaking, how do you implement a vegan diet for 7+ billion people around the world? How will it work?
Well, for one thing, we know it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, it would be lovely if it did. They had that recent study that was done that was called, what would we do if the world went vegan overnight? It would be a disaster. Mm-hmm. And that study was kind of parroted everywhere. But what was interesting is that all they said was that it would be difficult for people to get enough B12 without supplementation, certain minerals like that it would be hard to get them without supplementation. But of course, we supplement cows already. The reason why our milk has B12 is because most B12 supplements that are produced in the world go to feeding these animals because they're not eating their natural diet anymore. So they don't have B12. They don't just grow B12. Yeah. They have to be supplemented. So I think that it was very clear from the study. What I thought some of the study was very poorly done. I did a review of it. There were some big flaws in the study. But one thing they did show was that certainly we would produce much more food if the U.S. went vegan overnight, for example. We'd produce a lot more food calories than we do currently. You could trade that to other countries for other foods that you need. They didn't mention that, which is obviously true. If you're producing much more food, so we can certainly give more calories to people. No question, if we convert current arable agricultural land, this is without converting any extra land to agriculture, we can certainly feed the population doing that. And they assumed within the study that we would just grow the food and feed it to people. So there was a surplus of former feed foods like soy and wheat and corn, especially corn and soy. There was a surplus, but certainly we could plant other things there instead. It's kind of irrational to assume that we would have to grow all this soy. We could grow other things on that land too. So I think it's very feasible. And certainly with some of these biotechnologies I was talking about, we can, if we want to, we can have B12 present in some of these foods without even having to add it. There's all sorts of things that we can do. So I think it's much more feasible. I mean, the second law of thermodynamics tells us that there's always energy loss when we have to convert one energy from one form to another. Much easier to convert straight from plants to us than it is from plants to animals. So.
I make that argument all the time, and people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, it just takes, we get all of our energy from the sun, and we get all of that sun energy from plants. So every time we go through another stage of the trophic system, we're losing energy to the environment. It's just the way it works.
Yeah.
And so I say that to people all the time. It's just more efficient.
Yeah. So that's why I would say study.
Someone's asked, sorry, are you going to say something then, Tim?
Sorry, Chris. I was going to read a question from
go for it.
that came up.
Yeah, go for it.
Way earlier. What's your thoughts on eating plant-based foods that are fried or cooked with animal products, or removing, say, cheese from a pasta salad and then eating the pasta?
Well, I know this is very controversial, but for me personally, I think that it just depends on you as a person. I think that it's about you don't want to obviously advertise animal products. I certainly, I think that it's important to, like, if someone's serving an animal product and you eat it because it's there, I think that's a really hard argument to make that you're doing something good for veganism by doing that. I think that's a very hard argument to make that it's a super good thing to do that. But for the example, the other day, my husband ordered a vegan burger and they brought it with cheese, and it was annoying because this restaurant does this all the time. And we usually send it back. This time he just peeled it off and ate it because he didn't want to just throw away the burger. So, otherwise it's vegan. So he doesn't mind if it touches his food. I couldn't do that because I'm really lactose intolerant. So I wouldn't be able to eat it anyway. It would make me really sick. So I think it depends on the person. If you can just take it off, do that. I don't really believe in wasting food. I think if you can keep from wasting food, that's a good thing. And you have to kind of judge the person you're working with too. Like sometimes if you're talking to someone and it's gonna, especially if you're at someone's house, say someone's made something for you and it's got cheese on it and you can easily take it off. If they'll be way less offended if you just take it off than if you tell them to take it back. Use your common sense and do what's right for you, for your health. And as far as the oil goes, again, I think that's a personal issue. I think it has more to do with your disgust response. I personally am okay with it. I don't think that it's hurting any extra animals. So I have no problem with it. Like I ordered a burger and fries the other day. A company here in town started their burger place. I think it's called like Flame Burger or something. And they just added a vegan burger with a vegan bun, and the fries it's the burger was cooked on the same grill with the other burgers. But I was like, it's okay because I'm telling them that this is an important thing and I'm encouraging them to make more of it. I think Gary Yourofsky has a similar stance on those kinds of things. So
yeah.
I totally
you guys, what do you think about that?
I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to avoid stuff when I can, but I'm not going to be too fussy. I
Yeah.
think, you know, like I said, cooking something on the same grill, it might have like a couple specks of something. I mean, it's not too. I mean, you want to encourage them to keep doing a vegan product. I mean, you know, you can make the suggestion, oh, maybe you could do this, but I mean, I think, you know, you want to encourage them. You know, if you and you've got to be a good kind of example of a vegan as well. If you go in there and be like a complete dick, then they're not going to want.
They're going to wonder why they offered it in the first place.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. If you go in there and just be nice and polite and stuff, and you know, you kind of respect the fact that they're trying, I think that's a really good thing to do. Yeah, I think, you know, we need to help them help us. Kind of, you know.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
It's the main thing. I've got a question from Chickpea Sani, who says, do we need more vegan products marketed towards children?
I think so, because I've got kids, and it's really amazing when vegan products are made for kids. For example, one of my children really doesn't like the Gardein tenders. She doesn't like them because they're not enough to her like a chicken nugget. You know, she likes chicken nuggets. She just always did. I mean, obviously she would never eat them now because she's horrified by it. But when there's a company called Eve's Vegetarian Cuisine, and they made a nugget that we didn't realize for a long time it's vegetarian, but for a while it was using some egg albumin in it as a binder. And we stopped buying it. And then a few months ago, they made it vegan, and it was incredible, like so exciting. My daughter was so thrilled. And it's really nice when people take that into account, when they really, especially, and that's why I really do value good vegan products that are really as good as, because I think that there's no excuse for not making products that are at least as good, if not better, than the real thing. Like, we can do better. And when it comes to kids and stuff, I'm excited about that. McDonald's Canada is considering doing a McVegan here as well. And it's so exciting, because that means, you know, my kids could go, especially because here in Canada, the fries at McDonald's are vegan. It depends on your country whether they're vegan or not, but ours are. That would be amazing. My kids could go and have a Happy Meal, and it's nice to feel like other kids. I think especially because veganism is getting more popular with young people, I think it's a really good area to focus on.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to have to quickly go for a quick toilet break, Tim. Do you want to take over?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I've been drinking so much water.
Yeah, you've overdone it, Art.
Okay, I will be right back.
So yeah, Blue had a question.
It's a good thing that there's two of you for the 24-hour stream. You really need that.
I know. But he has to be on for the whole time, though, because he's doing the OBS. And so I can't let him be by himself, so I have to be on the whole time, too. Yeah. I wouldn't do that. So Blue asks, I'm curious, ModVegan, what have your kids experienced being vegan? Do they ever influence their friends?
I think they definitely influence their friends. It's been interesting to see, especially with my older daughter. There's one or two vegetarians in her class, because they go to a Chinese school, and so a lot of their friends, some of them are Buddhist. They might eat less meat. They might not eat certain kinds of meat. A lot of them will be vegetarian, but very few are vegan. And I have noticed, for example, she does tend to say at school that she's a vegetarian that doesn't eat cheese or eggs. So she'll just say that. So they've influenced her a little as well, too. I think she's a little shy about it. My younger daughter is the animal rights activist who tells everyone she's vegan, who tells everyone they should be vegan. So yeah, it's really cute. Like they definitely have an influence. And I'm really grateful to the other parents at the school that also are vegetarian or vegan, because we've been able to make it always that there's always a vegan option when they have school meals and things like that. So that's really nice.
Yeah, that's really, to me, the best advocacy is food, getting food in front of people and letting them see how good the food can be.
I completely agree.
You can't just tell them about it. I actually have a question that goes back to something you mentioned when we first brought you on, which is you had said you've convinced the fair majority of your family to go vegan. And I'm sure myself and many people listening right now would love to know how the heck you did that.
Well, I can definitely never take credit, because I think that obviously it's not going to do any good unless the person that you're talking to has some level of interest. And it's been interesting, especially in the last year or so. My mom has gone vegan. A lot of her friends have also gone vegan. And that's been really exciting, because it's, I kind of thought that was an option for my mom, but I was never sure that it was going to really happen for her, you know. But I think that, especially in my husband's case and my kids' case, the thing that's really helped is just being honest, but not pushy. Because I think you can be you have to wait for people to ask you questions. I think always try and use more of a Socratic method than just telling people what to think. That doesn't work particularly well. I was really pleased, obviously, when my husband went vegan, because that made my life so much easier. I really feel for people who are the only vegans in their families, because I can't imagine what that would be like. I really appreciate that from the beginning he was willing to say that he would not cook meat in the house anymore, because it makes home a very stressful place for a lot of people. And I think when you look at a lot of the statistics where people talk about vegans having higher rates of depression and things like that, I don't really know exactly what the cause of it is, but I think part of it has to be just feeling under pressure all the time, because it's just a slight irritation that's always with you. You know, if you're it's grating because you see things in such a different way than you used to. Like I made a video about shrimp this week, the New Wave Shrimp, a company that's created a shrimp alternative. And doing the research, I was just looking for a picture of a shrimp, and I don't know what it was, but just like seeing all these, I would never have thought that I would get to the point where just looking at pictures of shrimp would make me want to cry. But I was so sad. And I think that you need a safe space. I mean, to be honest, I think it's really nice if you can make your home a space where you don't feel like you're under stress all the time and just having to constantly see people eating meat and everything like that. I really think it's good to find a place where you can at least get away from all of that. And that's why vegan social media, I think, will always be really important.
Someone just put an interesting...
Right, and I wonder...
Oh, sorry, you carry on. Sorry, I kind of came in halfway through the conversation, so I didn't know where you were. Carry on, Tim.
Well, I was just going to say, I wonder if part of the reason why the depression rate among vegans is also impacted by the fact that early adopters of veganism probably tend to be a little bit more empathic. And so maybe they're just predisposed to have more issues with depression.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly a valid hypothesis as well. I think that certainly when you look at early adopters, people who want to be part of something too, I think that that's part of it as well. Sometimes I get comments from people that are very angry and upset that are vegan. And so kind of like what Chris was saying earlier, I don't think veganism will solve everything, because I'm sure we've all met our fair share of vegans that just, you kind of wish that they could take a break or something and come back when they feel better, eat a snack, eat some chickpeas or something, but it's just like that Snickers ad, you know. But
yeah, the question someone put in here, which was quite interesting. They want to know what your stance is on showing children graphic footage from factory farms and slaughterhouses. Do you think that kids should be educated on that stuff from an early age?
I'm someone who actually doesn't really approve of that personally. I know that there's some people who use footage that is more graphic in a really good way, and they do it in a way that is useful and helpful. I think when Emily would make her videos for Bite Size Vegan, she did a really good job with it, because I do think it's important to be respectful of the animals themselves. I don't think it's good to just share images that are very violent without providing a context for it. So, I mean, this is even when it comes to adults. I don't think that it's proper to just throw something out there without providing a context, because we all know when you think about what causes people to have empathic reactions, they don't tend to have empathic reactions to someone that they don't identify with. So if they see a human or an animal suffering that they have no identification with, they are not going to have a response. I mean, there's so much research that backs this up. That's why people who are working as prison guards in concentration camps could treat people so horribly. It's because they saw violent, horrible things every day. Imagine those people, you know, putting people in piles in ovens, you know, I mean, people can do that because they disassociate themselves from the violence and they remove themselves any contextualization from it. So I think we have to be careful about the kinds of images we show and share, because just sharing a violent image on its own, I don't think is helpful. And certainly when it comes to children, again, you are getting these children when they're very young. I think it's much better to share with them what an animal really is. I find that my kids, at least, when they see pictures of cute little pigs and, you know, other animals, cows, they have more respect for the animal. And my kids have never seen any violent footage, and they are still horrified at the idea that you just have to tell a kid that this animal that you see standing there, that you pet on the nose, you know, at the sanctuary, there's people who want to kill this animal and turn it into a burger. That's way more, like, that is plenty. Most children hear that and they're like, it's crazy, we have veggie burgers, why? Like, I remember my daughter, actually the most violent thing that my daughter probably ever saw was right after I decided to go vegan. We were watching a David Suzuki nature special. And it was just this little skit where they were showing a native person hunting a deer. And it was meant to be in the past. This was supposed to be like set in the past, like 5,000 years ago. This is what people did. And my daughter, she's like, Mom, do people still eat animals? And I was like, yeah, honey, some people still eat animals. She's like, but they don't eat animals in Canada, do they? Yeah, they eat animals in Canada, but not in Calgary. Like, that's the city we live in. She's like, not in Calgary. Nobody here eats animals. And I was like, yeah, they do. And then she was eating IKEA meatballs because this was before she'd gone vegan. And I think she'd just been to IKEA and eaten meatballs. And I was like, yeah, that's where they come from. And she's like, I'm never eating that again. That's just disgusting. I mean, that's like, crazy. Why would I do that? That's so kids really don't need graphic imagery in order to come to this
conclusion. Like, you don't have to show kids graphic imagery to get them to not commit violence against humans. So if you're teaching kids from a young age not to commit violence to animals, there's no need for them to see it. The reason why the slaughterhouse footage is so important is to teach the adults. It's for the adults. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the kids just don't need it. It's not even pragmatic, and it's just going to scar them.
Because I've heard people,
I totally agree.
I've heard people in the past say that about taking that kids should be taken to slaughterhouses, you know, because you learn how you make a cake, but you don't learn how you make a burger. But from what you say, it would probably be better to take kids to sanctuaries and actually introduce them to the animals.
Yes, exactly. Take your kids to sanctuaries, not slaughterhouses, please.
Sanctuaries, not slaughterhouses.
That, definitely.
We're scarred for life, poor things.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
Of course, good luck arranging that field trip. But
there's some more questions in here as well. I'm scrolling back. I've got
I have one from Arnold that
go for it.
It kind of relates to the question that was just asked a little bit.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
How do you think it is best to introduce the vegan ideology to young children? So I guess we kind of just answered that with the sanctuaries.
I think it begins with teaching your kids ethics, and I suppose it depends on what ethical tradition you're from and all that. But we teach our children that it's not good to harm anyone, and we probably don't even need to add unless you need to. That's fairly obvious. But I think when you teach children that it's wrong to harm people without having a very good reason for it, I think that's if you teach them that and you include animals in it, I think that's probably a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
There was another question I'm just trying to find. So much going on in the chat. It seems like you've got a lot of fans in the chat. Everyone's complimenting you in the chat. So, everyone, if you're not subscribed, please make sure you go and subscribe. ModVegan, search it, subscribe, rack those numbers up. The daddy, the non-vegan in the chat, asked, why can't vegetarians just go vegan? Why be half away and still sympathise and claim to understand, but don't go all the way? Why do you think that some people stay at vegetarian and don't go vegan, I guess? I mean, I'm sure we could probably all answer that in some way.
Well, I do have friends that have been vegetarian their entire lives, and most of them, once they become aware of these kinds of things, they do generally tend to cut animal products like dairy and eggs out of their lives. And I think it's getting easier for people to do that. I have met people who especially grew up as religious vegetarians who they believe that they need, it's odd, but a lot of people, especially who grew up Hindu, there is a belief that dairy and ghee and things like that are somehow essential for their health. So I think that we need to help break those barriers down, because there is a belief, believe it or not, that dairy is very essential. And you will run into that in communities where it's more just part of religion. And then with friends who are ethical vegetarians, I do think that sometimes the reason people will not call themselves vegan, especially if they've been vegetarian for a lifetime, I have friends who do not eat any animal products anymore, but they still go to places where they have things served that might contain traces of animal products, and they just choose not to ask. So those people might consider themselves vegetarian rather than vegan, simply because they aren't capable of fully complying, I suppose, with the diet. So there's that as well.
Yeah. Someone just asked if there's any vegan children's books, you know.
There are a few. There's there are more all the time. I know that Ruby Ross books are very popular, and they're really wonderful, some really sweet ones. I know that there's also there's the Not My Mommy's Milk, I think is the name of it, by Julie Barkalow, I think it is. Julie Barkalow. That's a really great one as well. Okay. And that's just intended for like toddlers. So there's some really good vegan children's books out there.
Great. Yeah.
And more all the time. If you're a vegan writer, that's also a really great way to contribute, because I think kids respond so well to those messages. And it's amazing how many children's films really have sort of a vegan animal rights message if you really look into them, like the Ferdinand is coming out, you know, that kind of thing. I think children are very receptive to that. And, you know, if you're a creator in those kind of fields, write scripts and write books, definitely.
Totally. Isn't Aysel Mazard working on a vegan children's book?
He is. Yeah. He's working on a book about an earthworm. Well, it's not, I wouldn't say it's about an earthworm. I'm really curious how it's going to go, because the book, I think it's really sweet, but it also is slightly macabre. So it's from the perspective of an earthworm. And they have like visions of a slaughterhouse floor made of concrete, you know, about like these animals never seeing the sun and things like that. Might be a little bit macabre. I'm not sure if I would be reading it to very small children, but you know.
I'm interested to hear it.
Yeah. It's a little dark, but I was a little dark too.
Yeah,
so.
Sounds great. We've got to give a shout out to Kearney, who's donated another $10. Don't think we've given.
Oh, congratulations! Thank you so much, Kearney.
So thank you. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Kearney.
Thank you, everyone who's donated.
This
work is so important, and I've worked with some people here in my own town and spoken with people, and it is really expensive to provide care for these animals. And I think in the process of switching away from factory farms and everything like that, we are going to have a lot of animal refugees who've had really awful lives. And I think if we can provide them some level of comfort, that's a really great thing.
Yeah.
And especially to support existing. So many people have dreams of opening sanctuaries and things like that. I would encourage people to really responsible, well-run sanctuaries and support them, because it's very hard to start one of these businesses. If any of you have ever looked into it, if any of you have even thought about caring for a child, let alone an entire farm full of animals, it's expensive. So yeah, I would say support people like Sail Ranch, because that's really the best thing to do. Work with existing organizations that are well-run and really take care of their animals, that have open policies. I love that they do the tours and everything like that. It's so important, because we've had some cases even here in my own town. There's been quite a few issues with sanctuaries that just run out of money, and I don't think they neglect animals out of any desire to do so, but they start without being fully aware of the mammoth obligations involved. So.
Totally. Absolutely. There's a lot of sanctuaries that open and then they have to close, and then they don't know what to do with the animals they took in because they didn't have the money to take care of them. So then they have to push that burden onto other sanctuaries that knew well enough to not take in more animals than they could afford or take care of.
Yeah.
And so it just creates, a lot of times it'll create a worse situation. And then you had mentioned something too that I think is really important. You really do need to vet. With any charity that you give money to, you should do a little bit of research in vetting that charity. And I'll only talk about this a little bit because I don't want to smear anyone, but there is a sanctuary that we rescued a horse from before, and that what that sanctuary was doing was basically using the horse, very underweight, very underfed, incredibly malnourished, and they were using that horse to promote the sanctuary. So they didn't really take care of the horse. They let the horse stay very malnourished because that looked shocking. And so people, and there he is on the screen. He just popped up on the screen a second ago. But it looks shocking to people, and so people will give them money for that. And they're abusing an animal. They're exploiting an animal for the sanctuary. To me, that's horrifying. So you do have to do a lot of work to, or not a lot of work, but you got to do a little bit of effort to vet these charities for sure.
Yeah, and one thing I appreciate with what Jen's doing too, you need to have respect, I think, for the dignity of the animal. Like when we were talking about slaughterhouse footage and things like that, it's so important, I think, to show respect for these animals and to treat them with dignity, to tell their stories with dignity, because just milking money out of them, you end up with the same problem that we've all seen with charities for children in the developing world, where they've got the kid covered in flies and they tell you to get, it's really disturbing, and it's not the right way to run these things. And I'm really glad that that's not how they do it. So.
Yeah. Oh, just on some good news then, we've got some more donations in on the GoFundMe. We've got $20 from Free William. We've got $10 from Kerry Marshall. We've got another $50 from King Arugula. And anyone want to take a guess what the total is at the moment? I've got it up.
I know.
Tim,
Let us
you
know.
want to take a guess?
Let us know in the chat what you guys think. Where you think we are so far.
If we wait for the chat to catch up, though, we're on a delay. Remember?
Yeah, I know.
Well,
we're always waiting on the chat.
So we are currently on $727.
That's fantastic.
That is amazing.
Thank you so much.
That is absolutely amazing.
Our target for the whole thing was only going to be 1,000, so, and we're only a few hours in. So this is incredible. Thank you so much, everyone. That's like amazing.
And like I was saying, I think what is that? That's one delivery of the hay that she was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
A couple of bills, but it's still every bit counts. So that's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for doing that. That's amazing. So we've got time for a few last questions then. OG Musin says, she mentioned raising kids with ethics. I'm curious, does ModVegan do some form of non-violent parenting?
Yes, of course. Yeah. I think that's really important. I think that you have to. I don't believe in coercing children. So that's something, again, we have these conversations all the time. I'm a little more probably on the extreme end of this, I suppose, by some people's standards, but I do think it's very important to let children make decisions for themselves and give them autonomy in anything where it's not going to harm their safety. So
yeah, of course. Yeah,
we always are having conversations. My husband and I, the other day, we took the kids to the movie theater, and I remember one of my daughters was wearing this outfit that was completely bizarre looking. I was like, it's not going to hurt her. It might hurt her feelings if someone thinks it looks really weird, but that's the way she likes to dress. So as long as she's safe, it's fine. So yeah, I think that it should be part of, if you've got kids, you need to raise them to be kind to other people, and you start that at home by being kind to each other.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, I mean, I guess we're coming up to the end of the hour then. I mean, is there anything you want to kind of add to it? Anything you want to plug? Do you want to say, get people to subscribe to the channel, clearly?
Well, of course, if you want to follow me on ModVegan, please do. But I want to thank you guys so much for doing this, for inviting me to participate. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate what you're doing. And I am so enthusiastic about the future of veganism. I think that the world is going vegan. It's so exciting. As I was saying with Kim as well, like there's such a reason for us to do this. It's not just we're doing this for the animals. There's so many reasons for the planet, and it all works together, because I think when you develop greater knowledge about things, you can progress. And we're starting to understand that we don't need to eat animals, that we don't need to treat animals in the way that we have for centuries, and we can change. And I think all of us in every part of our lives, we need to be willing to change and respond to new information, and just be open to each other. Treat each other with kindness, treat the planet with kindness, and the animals too. So thank you so much for having me on, guys. And I hope that you raise much, much more money for the
Thank you.
Thank
you so much for coming on. We really, really do appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. It's been
Thank
so
you. It's
lovely
been
to
an
speak to
absolute pleasure. Thank you so much to everyone who's donated.
No worries. Thank you. Hopefully see you in the chat later.